We're going to call this meeting to order. So would you call the roll, please?
And just as a reminder to all who are in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county's YouTube page. Calling the roll, Judge Adrian.
Here.
Ms. Yarham.
Here.
Ms. Gibbons.
Here.
Mr. Cross.
Here.
Judge McClellan.
Here.
There is a quorum.
Thank you. Are there any public comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have one. Mr. Mark Stanton.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Chairman Adrian, I'm going to request an additional minute. I think the time limitation is 2. I'm requesting 3.
Okay.
Very good, thank you. My name is Mark Stanton, S-T-A-N-T-O-N. I'm a magistrate at Juvenile Court. I'm also the private, or I should say public office or information officer for the judicial branch at Juvenile Court. I'm going to refrain, hopefully, from offering any personal comment or opinion today. It'll expedite the update that I'm going to provide, and it'll ensure that your eyes remain open during this condensed presentation. And I just want to reiterate the letter, and I read it again for about the 4th time, that was sent to the committee on August 14th, 2024 by Councilman Gallagher, who chairs the Judicial Committee, or the Judicial Services Committee, about the role. I'm not instructing you folks what the role is. You know what your role is. But I do want to reiterate the fact that I'm going to address an issue here that I think is outside the role of the committee. But because there has been such a tremendous impact and amount of attention dedicated to it, I want to revisit it and provide assurances to this committee and also to the community at large that Juvenile Court is actively pursuing an equitable distribution of cases among the attorneys. Since May 2nd, 2024, which is the seminal date, 69.4% of the cases that have been charged have been assigned to the public defender. Now, that's certainly far more in number than they would normally receive. The public defender receives cases that end in 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. There's been media reports that they're receiving 50% of the cases. That's inaccurate. I don't think it's intentionally inaccurate, but it's inaccurate. 69.4% of the cases in the last 4 months have been assigned to the public defender's office. That is not an expanded or bloated figure. There are conflicts within the public defender's office, and they have to remove themselves from certain cases for a variety of reasons. That conflict figure is not involved in this. The judges have met are meeting on a quarterly basis. Their first meeting was 5/2/24. Excuse me. The first meeting of 5/2/24. They had another meeting on August 28th, 2024, where they reviewed what they had done since May 2nd, 2024. What they're doing is making sure that each other is accountable, that each other individual is abiding by the equitable distribution of cases, not only to the public defender, but to all the assigned counsel that are on the assigned counsel list. They're monitoring one another. They're holding each other accountable, which, quite honestly, and I don't mean to be flippant, is something that the United States Supreme Court doesn't do. And I think the judicial branch of Juvenile Court should be applauded for doing this. They're going to meet again on August 28th, 2024, on a daily or every other day basis. Every jurist in Juvenile Court and or their bailiffs or clerks send information, daily assignments to the officer in charge of compiling the statistics on that to update each other and the administrative judge as to where the assignments are going, to whom they are going, and what is the percentage of the distribution. Again, they're going to meet on August 28th, 2024. They're going to do this on a quarterly basis, again, to hold each other accountable. The court is checking all qualifications of all attorneys who are assigned to cases. If they're not qualified, and I'm an old man and I've been in the court system for 45 years. I've never used quotation marks around a word, but since qualified is manipulated for the last year as to who's qualified and who isn't, qualified means are you abiding by the rules of superintendents? If an individual does not qualify under the rules of superintendent Supreme Court, they're being removed from the assigned counsel list. They will be reinserted on that list if, in fact, they fulfill their CLEs. Along those lines, Juvenile court is providing updates for all the assigned counsel throughout the area, not only in juvenile, but in the general division. Here's where you can obtain your CLEs. We do a symposium out at juvenile court each year. It's a seminar. The jurists do presentations on not only court procedure and evidence, but on preparing for those types of things. Last year, even I presented on dispositions, which are sentencings. I can state unequivocally that the 60 minutes with which of my presentation was the least attended of any of them. But be that as it may, these folks are dedicated to uplifting the competence of the attorneys. Assignments, they'll never be perfectly disseminated, as you can understand that. There's always going to be a top 10 and a lower 10, and the public defender will always be in the top 10, they'll never be in the lower 10. What we're trying to do is bolster that middle so that more attorneys receive more cases, but they still have to be competent attorneys. You have to retain that discretion as a jurist. You can't just have a person who's next on the list, and that's what we're doing. The person that comes up next on a list, if he or she declines the case, then they go back to the end of the process and it starts again. But the judges still have to retain some discretion. There's certain individuals who may be qualified, but their competence may not be equal to the nature of the case that's being assigned to them, but they'll receive another case. There's attorneys on that list who want to handle cases out in juvenile court. They're earnestly involved with that, but they have such expansive caseloads because of their expertise, because of their high level of competence and commitment. They can't get out there very often, but we still encourage them to come out. Since 5/2/24, the vast majority of cases have been assigned to qualified attorneys. In other words, they've fulfilled their CLE requirements. And we've been vetting the billing for those attorneys, and if those attorneys do not have the CLEs that are necessary, they're not being paid. I can tell you from personal experience, I brought an attorney from downtown out. I was after him for a year and a half to please come out and help us out there. He came out and did 3 cases. He did them perfectly. He did them supremely. He did them sensitively. Each one of those kids walked out of that courtroom an inch taller than they were when they walked into the courtroom. But he didn't have the CLEs. He didn't have the 6 hours for the year. So he didn't get paid. So he lost $2,000. And you know what? That $2,000 meant nothing to him because he knew that he had done the job that he needed to do on behalf of that child. The reason I'm saying that is, and I'm just going to leave you with this one thought. Approximately a decade to 12 years ago, I was selected by a group of attorneys here in town to go down to a Supreme Court committee meeting because the prosecutor at the time in Cuyahoga County prosecutor, not named Michael O'Malley, was pushing hard to have a random selection of attorneys for felony cases because he knew darn well that if you have a random and a rotary that the next guy up gets the next case, he was going to have a lot of marginal attorneys with marginal commitment being assigned to very serious cases. So we had 12 judges on that committee. They were appellate judges, common pleas judges, and municipal court judges. We did a 2-hour presentation. 12-0 was the vote from those 12 judges, who were not only affronted by the fact that that guy tried to, he didn't infer, he stated directly that the only reason the assignments were being done is because people go to their fundraisers and their pals. And those 12 judges felt such a distinct sense of affront that they were visibly upset. Not only because they conduct their own courtrooms with rectitude, with competence and with sensitivity, but that somebody who was a trial attorney himself for 30 years or had sat on the bench for that period of time made those types of accusations. Well, I am telling you, folks, I've been an attorney in this town for 45 years. It qualifies me to do nothing other than to tell you I've been in every courtroom here and in almost every county in this state and 3 other states. When it's being implied and sometimes directly stated that those judges out in juvenile court are repaying their pals and patting them on the back and not caring about those kids, it's a disgrace. It's indefensible. And we're going to abide by the equitable distribution of cases. But I can tell you as a jurist myself, If there's somebody that I don't think is appropriate for that particular case, he or she is not getting it. I'll give them another case, but they're not getting that case. Because you know what? It's not about making these attorneys be able to pay their bills. That's their own job to become competent. It's about protecting these children. And if you have a person that doesn't have commitment, that doesn't have passion, that isn't vigorously defending these children and standing up for them for the first time in their lives, they have somebody actually advocating on their behalf. And to denigrate that process in such a manner, not only does it disservice to that court, the court doesn't care. It does a disservice to this community. But I will tell you this, we're going to be diligent about it. We're going to pursue this. We're going to maintain it. The judges are going to maintain accountability to one another, and there will be an equitable distribution of cases. Thank you very much.
Before you leave,
Mr. Stanton, I have a question after the judge.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'm curious, some of the names I've seen circulated are people that appeared before me and were qualified to defend aggravated murder cases, but says that they're not qualified juvenile court. Is there a different qualification standard?
Well, the standard is, just as it is for general division, if you're going to handle a death penalty case, you have to take death penalty, 12 hours of death penalty qualification every 2 years. You're not going to hear from me or any judge out there that those qualifications shouldn't be in place.
But if they're qualified to handle an aggravated murder in the adult court, are they qualified to handle matters in juvenile court?
They're qualified from a competence standpoint. But
So
they're
is
not,
this some sort of a, we're going to, didn't dot the I on the CLE for juvenile court?
it's a technical thing, but it is up to the, Your Honor, it's up to the individual attorneys. It only takes 6 hours a year. You can do that in an afternoon. We're going to abide by that. We're going to strictly apply that.
So
But-
from your experience on the bench, are these people who, in the articles, are being told, we're being told they're not qualified?
No, that's what I said. The manipulation of that word is unfair. It gives a total disservice to the community, and the community doesn't understand why that's being used. They're not unqualified from a competence standpoint. There are many qualified attorneys, technically, who are incompetent or are marginally competent.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Two questions real quickly, and I don't know if anybody else has questions. I'll defer until. Okay. My questions are first. When we're talking about qualifications, you said that folks are qualified under the rules of superintendents. They also qualified under the Ohio Administrative Code.
The only qualification that is necessary is abiding by the rules, Supreme Court rules of superintendents. And there are local rules also that you have to have so much experience in certain areas to qualify to be on more serious felonies or aggravated murder, bindovers, any case of that nature. You have to have certain qualifications. No matter how much experience you've had, you still have to qualify. Like for bindovers,
Yeah.
you have to have tried 6 cases in the last 10 years. You have to have 12 hours of certain CLEs. You have to have you have to have 3 years of experience in juvenile court, and you also have to have tried 3 of the 6 cases in juvenile court.
Yeah, I mean, the allegations that I saw included the fact that some of the people that were deemed unqualified didn't qualify under the Ohio Administrative Code, and that's why I raised the issue with you.
But the Ohio Administrative Code is part of the reimbursement process, Your Honor. So if you're going to be paid, that reimbursement comes back to the court from the state, from the Ohio Public Defender Commission. If you're not qualified, that reimbursement cannot be made.
Okay. Then my second question is the remarks that you made orally today, are you going to reduce them to writing and submit them to us?
If you're requesting that I do so, I will certainly do so.
I am requesting.
It will be done.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Mark.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Hey, Mark, I have a question.
You know, it's tougher for me to turn around than it used to
I know. I remember we used to be younger in our younger days. As an attorney, I was a police officer.
be. Oh, you were a commander too, you know.
Yeah. My question is, without getting into any political things, is one of the things that I've been hearing, and I told him I'm not educated enough on this yet, but the amount of bindovers in Cuyahoga County compared to other counties. and I hear you say, okay, we got these qualified people, and quite sure they are. Just from my standpoint, I'm trying to learn, why do we have so many bindovers compared to other counties in the state?
I appreciate your question, Marvin. If I may state, I just attended a seminar for magistrates a month ago. We had a juvenile court judge from from Delaware County, just above Franklin County. Delaware County is a booming area. I mean, it's increased its population 100% in the last 10 years. He's been a judge for 14 years, and he said to all of us, because most of the magistrates were from northeastern Ohio, he said, I have a story to tell you. He says, and I'm looking for some assistance here. He says, I'm having a bind over next week, and everybody's doing this. Yeah, you're having a bind over, okay. He says, it's my first bind over in 14 years. In Delaware County, he'd been a judge for 14 years. He'd never had a bind over. You know why? Because he didn't have cases that qualified for bind overs. Here, Marvin, Mike O'Malley's not out in the neighborhoods trying to create crime so he can bind people over. The judges in juvenile court are not out in the neighborhoods, okay, or conspiring with the police to create violent crime that are going to be bind over cases. These are statutorily mandated. Okay, this is, again, it's in Councilman Gallagher's letter. That's outside the scope of this committee, but I will tell you this. And I said it when the national conference came in of juvenile family courts. All these people got up and told us wonderful, beautiful stories about their communities and their counties and what they're doing with their specialized dockets. And I said, that's wonderful. I'm so happy for all of you. It's sunshine and, rainbows. This is Cleveland, Ohio. This is Cuyahoga County. There's no poverty that relates to those other places that relates to here. There's no gang activity in those other counties that relates to here. There's no consistency of violence in those other counties that there is here. This is a separate universe. There's 88 counties in this state. Do you think that 82 of the counties care a hoot about whether or not bindovers are occurring in Cuyahoga County? Of course they don't. They don't have bindovers. They just don't have that type of activity, that type of criminal activity going on. And it's not only regrettable, it's tear-inducing to hear this, to see it day after day. And I've requested for that marvelous series of articles from the Cleveland.com, Ms. Durbin, which I thought was well balanced and extremely well done and was absolutely necessary to hear. I said, you can have all those stories and have all those people come up here and talk about the fact that there's not an equitable distribution of cases and these kids are not being represented well. Do 40 hours of that, even though we've heard far more than 40 hours. Then bring in videos for 40 hours, and you know about this better than anyone, of every violent crime that's committed that's on a video. I just sat in Judge Kristen Sweeney's room the other day, 5 bind-over cases for one young man. It's beyond regrettable. But they're all on video with guns in people's faces. He knew all those people. These are 5 separate incidents in the same neighborhood. That doesn't happen in 82 out of the 88 counties. And it certainly doesn't happen with the same frequency as here. Juvenile court, Mike O'Malley, we didn't create these situations. What we have to do is arrest recidivism, suppress it and arrest it. And that woman sitting in the middle there, Bridget Gibbons, could tell you more about programs. She just made a phenomenal presentation to you 2 weeks ago. Those programs work. They work. I administrate the drug court. We've had phenomenal success in the drug court because the resources are there. And these kids do not reoffend. The high percentage of them do not reoffend. It's about programs. It's about catching them early enough and giving them the resources, the attention, and the time. And do you think there's trauma in most of these counties with these kids growing up as there is here? Of course not. So I'm sorry for being so long-winded, but
I asked the question, so you know me by now.
But the criticism is misplaced, and we're wasting time. Resources.
We're not worried about the criticism we have out there. We're talking about my natural thing. I just want to know is there something we can do better? And like you say, Ms. Gibbons, what she put on them programs, I know how they work too, because
course
I
you
was
do.
commander of community policing, so I know these different programs work. We just got to give them some more funding for them.
Exactly. Without Ms. Gibbons, we never would have had a diversion center. And she and I were not on the same page on that one initially. It's been a phenomenal success.
That's why we got her up here, because she's great.
I know that, but
Yeah,
you need to give a bright light to these kids when they walk out of that courtroom. And we want them to walk out of that courthouse, not walk back in. Correct?
I think that our charge, although Councilman Gallagher cleared it up a little bit for us, still encompasses us to speak on both the topic that you raised and this other one that's been raised by Marvin today, not to necessarily provide guidance, but at least to uncover what we have learned about where those things are, particularly given the fact that there are hot button issues in the community. The community is expecting us to speak on them. So,
They're entitled to expect that, Your Honor.
and I think they're entitled to expect that too. My concern at this juncture, I hear what you're saying as it relates to Cuyahoga County. I think that one of the things that I want to do before we close down the shop, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on either of those two, because what we can do by way of even recommendation, let alone direction, is so limited that it would be not the best use of our time to spend a lot of time on it. But I would like to have a apples to apples comparison, for instance, between Cuyahoga County and Franklin County to highlight, okay, what the differences are as it relates to the number of people who are charged with, major violent criminal activities, so that anybody who's looking at this can see, if there is that kind of a disparity that justifies some of the things that on the surface would look to be inappropriate, that we can highlight that. And if there is not that kind of information, I want to know that too.
Certainly.
I just want to be able to say to the community, we looked at this, and this is what we saw. So thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you for the
your
time.
remarks.
I think it's more than 3 minutes.
Yeah, yeah, you ate about half of my time for today, because we hold this to about an hour every time that we come to meet. But I appreciate it. Was there any other public comment?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to approval of minutes that have been distributed for September 5th meeting of the subcommittee. Is there a motion to accept the minutes as distributed?
So moved.
Yep, and I'll second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any unreadiness on the motion? Any unreadiness on the motion? Any unreadiness on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Minutes stand approved. Old business. Last time that we met, we talked about talking about scope of work, and I tasked you each to kind of identify the things that you thought were most appropriate for us to spend our time on. I'm still interested in, winnowing that down to just the 4 or 5 major areas where we actually can make a difference. And so I'm interested to hear from you what your thoughts are, in the interim period between the last time we met and today.
I think one thing is, Bridget presented a lot of information and a lot of programs, and I think to help us narrow our scope and really stay focused, looking at what the county's funding versus what's a volunteer program or what is funded by some type of other, state funding, I think if we could sort of organize things into sort of different buckets, it would help us figure out kind of what's in our scope, what's underfunded that maybe isn't a part of the court process that we could help encourage. And then I think really looking at on the back end, once kids leave the court system or step down from some of these programs, what's available to help the youth sustain in the community. Because I know from my experience, we're seeing kids coming back after they're back in their community for 6 months, 9 months, and, they've completed all the programs and they've gone back home. And so not necessarily treatment level services, but sort of, are there mentors, are there programs that can help because families are really overwhelmed and help support the youth to be successful, get some job skill training, or making sure the kids are staying in school or going to school. So I think I'm interested in knowing kind of what's available on the back end, because I think we might want to look at directing some resources there too.
Okay. Bridget?
Yeah, I can definitely provide, if that would be helpful, an overview. I don't know if it's something I can just send via email and we can post in some way. I'm not really sure how to simplify that, of what funding sources that we have for programming, where some of those funding opportunities overlap or where we are having some deficits. I know I did share last time when we were here, I think that it is important for us to remember, when a young person, we definitely talked about like the deep end today when we talk about young people picking up guns. That doesn't just happen in a day. A child picks up a gun and engages in something dangerous. There's usually some pretty serious red flags when those things are occurring. So I would just recommend that we don't narrow our scope too much, that we think about gun violence, especially around young people in our communities, that we think about a holistic approach that's a county-wide approach that is driven by trauma-informed care, because many of the young people who are picking up weapons and are engaging in violent behavior, they themselves have been victims to early childhood experiences of trauma. So I just would like to make sure that we're encompassing a holistic approach. I also agree, once a case comes to the attention of the court, and we're going to do everything we can to divert kids away and help them stay with their families in their communities where they're, and provide services that are developed to help families manage a young person's behavior. But once they come to our court, if it's a deep end, serious, behavior that jeopardizes community safety, I think there's lots of opportunities we can push further upstream. And helping, I think I shared the last time, I know I flew through this trying to get these presentations going, but, we are engaged in a federal grant with OJJDP, Continuums of Care, which is going to take a look at when young people start to pop up and show signs. When there's a school complaint that a kid isn't showing up, that's a big predictor of juvenile delinquency. When the family is experiencing violence and the child is the witness to that violence, or a caregiver is not able to take care of their young person's needs, these can be real risk factors for young people ending up in the juvenile justice system. So I would ask that, once we get that work group going and we start the process for developing the continuum of care, that the county think about ways to support those efforts. So, those are a couple things I'm just thinking about as Magistrate Stanton spoke today. We cannot wait for kids to get so far down the way where they're engaged in violence with guns. We have to think about this as not a court solution, but a county-wide solution that really looks at gun violence and what drives those things and addresses some of those underlying needs that lead young people into this system. One more thing. So I know I talked about the last time when we were discussing, I'd really like to look at, there are folks out there. I know I've mentioned to you all that the court is engaged with technical assistance through the Enia Casey Foundation. Our technical assistant provider is Catalyze Justice. I would ask that maybe they could provide, and now they are not Cleveland-based, so I don't know if we can Zoom them in somehow, but if we could provide some, national, they could maybe spotlight some national efforts that have been effective in reducing gun violence, and we could maybe have them do like a small presentation, zooming out even further outside of the state of Ohio to look at best practices to reduce gun violence. And then, there are recommendations around caseload sizes for juvenile probation officers. Cuyahoga County, there's been a pretty significant shift. years ago, it used to be about 25% of the youth that placed on probation were felony level offenses. Today, that's swung over to 75% of youth on probation have a felony level offense. That requires a different level of interaction with that young person. It requires, we're moving away from that sanction, that hammer, that punitive approach, and trying to make sure that we're thinking about what are the opportunities for that young person? What are their interests? How do we drive them into mentorship opportunities? How do we give them opportunities for educational, vocational? How do we support their families who, quite frankly, are in crisis? If their kid is coming into our court, they're in crisis. So how do we help those families? To do that, you need probation officers that can really build a relationship, not only with the young person, but can build a relationship with the family around that young person. And that family, could be lots of informal supports too. So reducing caseload sizes, I think, would be impactful and meaningful for those young people that are placed on probation. So doing that through supporting funding to add slots for probation officers, I think could be really meaningful. So those are just some thoughts I have, and I think it'd be good for us to kind of zoom out and look at what can our consultants talk to us about with models that they're seeing around the country that are effectively reducing gun violence in their cities. Those are just my thoughts.
Judge?
Whoops, there we go. I think, Bridget's probably in a better position in terms of what the focus should be for what the court needs. I think we need to focus on what county council can actually do. I mean, for example, legislative changes, county council can't change the mandatory bind-over law. So to focus on that, I think is probably misdirecting our time. But the example she raised about probation officers, the unbelievable number of programs that she introduced to us and explained to us, the need to support those, to continue those, and any additional programs I think would be appropriate and helpful. I know we talked last week, there was some program, I don't remember the name of it, where there used to be 8 people doing it. It's a 24/7 job, and it grinds these people out, and they're down to 2. So how do we get the support for that? Apparently a very successful program, great results, and obviously there's a need for it. So how do we support those kind of programs to make sure that they can get back up to 8 people, not lose the last 2, or whatever number they need to get that done? I think our focus has to be more on the kinds of things that Bridget talked about and Jennifer talked about in terms of the funding and the support and the things that county council can actually do with their budget. And I think that's more important focus for us.
Marvin?
I'm actually in agreement with everything that, because we've been discussing this, and I think the programs are really really important, and trying to get financing or however we can get it a little bit outside of what as on this committee. I did do something. I was at a working group with the FBI and the SAC, who was Greg Nelson, and they brought in somebody who was I can't remember she's over the DEI or something with the FBI that came in from Washington. And I spoke and told that we need help as far as the county and cutting down on some gun trafficking. I mean, we could get all kind of programs, but if the guns and bullets are here, law enforcement got to assist us. They got to get a handle on this gun trafficking. And they kind of said, I guess, well, we're going to look at it. And I'm going to meet with them again because I'm going to pound on it. When I ran the task force, we used to crack down on a lot of this, but it's, Cleveland Police, 350 officers short. But somebody got to stop this trafficking to assist, just like what the magistrate said. I guarantee you, and I've been around a little bit, a couple of years, that the trafficking part in Franklin County and Hamilton County is not on the level that it is up here. It's definitely different. I know that for sure. Now, there are crimes in Franklin County and Hamilton County has risen over the past years, but the magistrate is right. They can't really compete with us. And we don't want to be
Not that
competing.
they want to.
Yeah, they don't want to neither, because that's not a good thing. So we just got to, this is a community issue that gotta be handled. So I'm gonna ride with what we've been talking about, but I am gonna do my part to still try to hammer with the FBI to assist us, because it's assisting our whole community when they do that.
The problem, as I say, is that this is a target-rich environment that we're in as it relates to the things that could be done, which is why I was saying I think that I hear you, Bridget, and I agree with you in large measure. But I think that we really have to be very intentional about what we take on and what we point out. We've only got a limited amount of time to get anything done. And not only do we only have a little amount of time as to what we can get done, but there's so much that we could be doing that it would be very easy to get lost in the weeds. So, which is why I think the last time that we spoke, I had asked if the juvenile court could assist us by producing kind of a wish list, which I think would be useful given what everybody else has said, because that would give us an idea as to the kinds of things that we could point out to county council, where they could actually weigh in with some additional resources and make things better than they are currently. This thing with regard to probation officers, for instance, and other program staff that where you had good programs, but now they are just marginally functional because of the fact that there are so few folks. And the reason why I'd asked for a wish list last time around is because we know that that the county is probably not going to give you everything that you want. Okay, that probably goes without saying. When we take this thing off of the table with regard to telling them what to do about how they shift money around in the indigent budget, because it appears that they've taken some steps to kind of bring that into balance. So if we take that off of the table and we're saying, okay, well, that's off to the side. Now, what we're talking about is additional dollars. And so getting some idea as to what kind of additional dollars we're talking about, I think would be extremely useful.
Would you like that by the next meeting? As I mean, I have an idea of what the court would be, what we think would be helpful in being a piece of addressing, youth violence in our community. But if it would be more helpful, we can get more specific on like what would be the budget on those additional probation officers. Right now we're in a unique situation where we have some funding around, like we're allocated for those 8 therapists, those multi-systemic therapists. We have funding allocated, which comes through Ohio Reclaim budget. Our issue is hiring. So maybe the questions or requests that we have is more of a county-wide, helping us get the word out on the need for these clinicians, helping support and incentivize these clinicians to stick around for a few years with us. I did multi-systemic therapy for many years. It is somewhat of an exhausting job. The shelf life is usually about 2 years. I did outlast that, but it's a phenomenal job when you're in people's homes and really getting to know them and building trust with them. It's one of the best jobs I've ever had. So, but, helping us to figure out how to recruit people around that, we certainly have opportunities. Again, the caseload size for probation officers, I could put a budget to that if that would be helpful for the next meeting. Supporting any efforts, any work product that comes out of our continuums of care, Cuyahoga County, Cuyahoga Care First, which is going to be the OJJDP work result. I don't have a budget on that, and I won't for about a year and a half, but I would just ask that we consider budgeting for that down the road once we have a work product that comes of that. So if it would be helpful for you, we can put together some specific details around the ask on those budgetary things.
Yeah, I
But
wasn't
some
necess-
of them aren't even budgetary. It's
I
just,
wasn't necessarily asking for it in rapid succession.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not trying to wear you out.
that's
you know.
okay. I'm used to rapid succession
Okay.
requests.
I was thinking there were two things that we really needed to do. One was, I think it would be useful for us to maybe make some time to sit down and talk to the judges of the juvenile court, you know, before we tear off in any given direction. See if we can get some idea as to what they think. And Mark, Janine, is that something that we could do? I don't know, even if we did it here, is that something that we could do using a virtual component so that maybe the judges wouldn't necessarily have to come down here? If we were in the room and they were on Zoom, can we do that, or is that a violation of the rules?
No, yes, you could, we've had presenters present via Zoom before, so we can do that.
Okay. I would like to hear from the judges of the juvenile court as to the things that they think are top of mind. I would also like to hear from the people that you've been talking about who have a global reach and are in a position to kind of give us an idea about some things that are working elsewhere to reduce recidivism, and particularly to reduce recidivism as it relates to gun violence. So if we can do those two or three things, it seems to me that we'd be on our way. I'd like to hear from the judges and to hear from the experts before I ask you to give us, you know, some idea about budget, because, you know, that may change after we hear what they have to say. You know, we might see some things that we'd say, okay, well, we need to shore up that aspect of things. And if we can do that, that would be useful. Yeah.
Judge, I don't know where we could fit this in, but I think we would be remiss if we didn't try to talk to some of just the average workers that do it every day, because they're the ones that's going to be able to tell us, I mean, some things that even when I was a commander with the police department, I mean, I was great when I was down there, but then all of a sudden I had to start going to meetings, and so I kind of lost a little contact on the street, what's going on. So I think that if we bypass the regular workers.
I'm with you. I always think that if you really want to find out what's really happening, you talk to the people who are on the line.
So that's one of my requests. If we can do that, I don't know how, but I think we need to figure out a way to ask the average worker.
Well, not only do I think that we need to talk to the average, you know, person who's providing services, at least within the court. And when I talk about people who are providing services, I'm talking about people who are interacting with a whole bunch of these programs, okay? Because they would have kind of the best feel for how things are really working. We also need to have a component of this that talks to the consumer of this, whether we're talking about parents or whether we're talking about juveniles or whether we're talking about both. But we need to have some feel for what their perception is of how well the court is functioning. Because I've been in lots of organizations where we were almost breaking our arm, patting ourselves on the back, and the people out front were saying, eh. Okay. So, I mean, again, you don't get a clear view of the world until you talk to the people who are actually doing the work and the people who are actually impacted by the work that's being done. So then it's about, I mean, we've got a limited amount of time to get all of this done. I'm not trying to burn you guys out, okay? But I think that it's important that we at least touch those few things in order to be able to give a comprehensive set of recommendations to county council. And then it's about how do we set that up. Now, I had asked Janine to give us a listing of potential dates. She sent those out. I saw Bridget actually had somebody go through her calendar and kind of figured it out. I had gone back and had asked Janine if she could do a doodle calendar for us so that we could kind of line that stuff up and figure out what it is. I don't know how many meetings we want to have. I think we need to pick the next meeting, and then we need to think about who do we want to talk to next, and then who do we want to talk to after that.
Is that before our meeting that we have talked to some people in between? Or are we talking about talking to them at a meeting?
Most everything that we're going to do is be right here in front of the cameras.
Right in.
I was wondering, is there some other setting? Because for a youth or a parent, this is going to be very overwhelming. So even if it's a smaller room, but it's like when you walk into a school meeting and everyone's sort of talking at you, I think we need a little bit less formal of a setting if we're going to invite youth and families to speak openly. I don't know if there's, the other room that we were going to be in originally, but, I would just imagine as a young adult, this could be a little bit overwhelming.
Laura.
Laura Black, council staff. I just want to make a recommendation. I think there are a few ways that we could handle or organize this. So if it is a smaller group, there is the opportunity that you could do some of it offline. If they don't want to do it in a public setting, then we would just have to be mindful of quorum. So we could have smaller subgroups of members that could report back to the larger group. We did a similar setting with the Citizens Advisory Council on Equity when they broke into subgroups. Additionally, if we wanted to bring people in, then of course we could use this room. We could also use another committee room if you wanted to use a smaller space and make it feel less public. But again, that would be it would be live streamed and everything. So we just want to be mindful.
Yeah, don't leave. Because I think we need to talk our way through this.
Okay.
My only concern about subgroups is that I think it's really important, given the nature of what we're talking about doing, that everybody get a chance to weigh in rather than getting a report. Especially if we're talking about things that have to do with the public actually getting a chance to give us their perspective. And frankly, as it relates to people who are on the line, giving us their perspective. If it's just me and Jennifer, we might take away some things, but some other folks might have some really valuable questions to ask that might be missed if everybody's not in the room.
So another opportunity, and this again is just an idea or recommendation, but again, we used a similar format for public forums when I assisted with the Citizens Advisory Council on Equity. We held almost like town halls where we invited the public to come in and speak to us. So you could actually advertise it as such. You could do that either here, or we broke it up into subgroups again and used a virtual format. But we could, again, figure the details out associated to the logistics.
Well, if I can get some help from staff
Of course.
with recommendations, to put in front of the subcommittee as to the way to go forth, I think that would be extremely useful. I think the one thing that, at least as far as I'm concerned, is a no-brainer is that we want to try to see if we can schedule something with something virtual with the judges
Okay.
of the court.
And I believe,
Sooner rather
and
than later.
I'll plug for Janine, she has sent a request for everyone's availability. So once we have some dates, we can work within that time frame and the availability of the subcommittee itself to try and schedule guests as needed.
Okay. That works for me.
Maybe we invite the judges to join us. Maybe don't have to do it virtually. Don't know what their position might be, but let's invite them.
We hold a meeting there at the court?
I don't know.
So then we would just have to figure out logistics for live streaming as well as then notice requirements. So we would have to coordinate that. I don't
We
know
have to
that we
work with
have
IT.
precedent of doing them off-site.
We would have to work with the IT department. We can
Okay.
figure that out.
We could figure it out? Okay.
You know, I think it's always, it puts people more at ease when you come to their turf rather than when you are talking about them having to come to yours. So if we can do that, that would be great. And for me, that would be the next. Okay, that would be the next thing.
Okay.
Okay.
And then one other recommendation is you do have the ability, if you did want to gather a more broad perspective or input from either employees, the public, users of this various different services and programs, you could develop a survey that we could send out on behalf of the subcommittee.
Okay. I had asked Janine to put together kind of a set of proposed committee activities. Some of the things I think we've talked about, and some of them we probably have not. We need to kind of have an idea of how or what is specifically we are looking at when we use the term recidivism. You know, you have an idea about that?
Yeah, so because we are grant funded for a majority of all of our programs, we have to, before submitting the grant to the state, we have to define what we mean by recidivism. And for us, it's typically new offenses, adjudications, 12 months from the time they start the program or after completion of the program. We take it sort of program by program. So we do pull recidivism for most of our programs, but not all of our programs. So some of our programs, we're doing different measures. We're looking at if it's an educational vocational program, we're going to be looking at, is the youth engaged in educational environment or working full-time. So we may or may not pull recidivism on that. So we have most of that available. We've got a quality assurance department that works closely with our IT department to pull that data. We do have most of our programs measured through recidivism, so we could share what we have for the programs we currently have.
Okay, so if we can schedule something with the judges, I think that would be the next kind of order of business. And then after that, then I think that we look at scheduling with the programs that you're working with.
Oh, the technical.
The TA programs.
Yep, so I'll reach out to them and just see some of their, catalyzed justice and some of our partners there, see what their availability looks like once we get some dates nailed down from Janine.
And then after we've talked to them, then I think that the next group I'd want to hear from would be we'd have to figure out how we make this work, but I'd like to sit down and talk to the people who are doing the work. Logically, for me, that would be the next thing. And then the last group that I would like for us to talk to would be the consumers. Okay. And sorry.
I would strongly suggest that, Bridget Gibbons may disagree with me, but I don't think so. I bet the judges would love to
Excuse me,
meet
Mr.
everybody.
Stanton. Excuse me, Mr. Stanton. Can you make sure you're speaking to the
I
mic?
think the juvenile judges would love to meet this committee out at juvenile court. Phenomenal conference room.
Been there.
Okay, so you're gonna have a better chance of getting everybody together, I think.
Well, I think so too, which is why I was suggesting that.
And then I'll tell Judge O'Malley that it was Bridget's idea.
That's fair.
And I'll work with Bridget to make sure we have it over there.
Okay,
Yeah, our IT department will be able to coordinate it, so.
okay. So the question I guess I have for you guys as we're winding down is time. How soon would you like to see us put this together, given the fact that we are talking about trying to meet with all 6 judges of the juvenile court and trying to coordinate those calendars with your calendars? I'm just trying to figure out what would be the most efficacious.
Was that the dates that the email that came out? Yeah, because I'm sorry I was late. I put mine in today, but I'm willing to go myself whenever you guys can get it. I'm willing to make the time.
Bridget, do the judges have a regular meeting date that they might coordinate with that?
They do. They have a judges meeting on a monthly basis. But I don't know that I can answer exactly like today, but I can certainly work with Janine and say, here's some possible options that would work with our judges because
That works.
their hearings are set pretty far out. So I'd want to make sure that we can try to get all of them.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, for me, it doesn't work if we can't get everybody to sit down.
Okay, perfect. I was going to suggest we find out the judges' availability and then go from there. We can coordinate with a doodle poll. Okay.
Okay. So then, bottom line is, I'm not necessarily going to call another meeting at this point. We'll call a meeting once we know, when we've got an opportunity to sit down with the judges. And then we will revisit the scheduling after we've had that meeting. Does that work for everybody?
Yes.
Okay. There were some other things under new business. I don't know how many of you had a chance to do a deep dive into the governor's report.
We did. I think everyone did.
Yep.
Is there anything that leaps out at you that needs to be on our agenda based upon what the governor's saying that he's going to do?
I don't know if any of the funding has to do with the regional facilities they were talking about building, but that may be something county council has to weigh in on.
I had a conversation with Councilman Gallagher, who said that, he's trying to chew on some people's legs about having the first one be here.
And we were at a meeting with the ODYS director last week where they said they haven't even sort of identified a location within Cuyahoga County yet to know where some of these facilities would be built.
Bridget, I will defer to you, but I can give a quick update there. The chewing has begun. At the direction of Councilman Gallagher, we have had a few initial conversations with both the court and the executives team associated to the opportunity of having a community correction facility in Cuyahoga County. There is an initial meeting tomorrow so that we can talk through what the logistics of that will be. It is our understanding it will be through an RFP associated process. So we're waiting for the application to come out and then we'll go from there.
Okay, is there anything else in there that needs to be high on our agenda to take a look at that you can think of?
Well, I think this, to second what Laura said about the CCF pursuing that opportunity, I think would be really important for Cuyahoga County. When we look at the data around kids that end up going to CCFs, we're talking about the kids we just discussed earlier. These are often kids with guns, robberies, aggravated robberies. Keeping them close to home will allow them to have good family engagement and treatment, keeping families at the table, better reentry planning, RPOs able to get out to the facilities with swiftness, help young people keep, to stay in the programs. It will also give an opportunity from our own community, to hire people within our community that understand kids uniquely from the city of Cleveland, that can be well matched to look like mentors and coaches to these young people. And, you know, I think some of the findings of the Ohio work group talked a lot about trauma-informed approaches. I think that's something that we should certainly replicate here as much as possible, always considering, you know, the types of training that we're providing to our staff working with young people to be trauma-driven. And those were some things that sort of jumped out to me in the report that I think are easily something that we can do, and keeping our mental health clinicians at the forefront of the work is really important. And they did mention mentors, credible messengers, and funding around things of that effort. So I think those are really important things that, you know, we should get behind and replicate in our county.
And Bridget, do you mind if I make one addition to that? One of the governor's recommendations associated to the report's findings is to close the larger congregate setting in Cuyahoga County. So that should be on our minds, associated to the fact that that closure may result in some movement of the youth that are assigned to that facility.
And just to be clear, the closure of the facility, it doesn't necessarily mean reduction and all of a sudden DYS is just going to spill young people out into the communities. This is really founded in research that young, you know, smaller facilities that are better staffed are able to deliver services better and help young people obtain the rehabilitation services that they can get. As smaller facilities are easier to staff, less violent, things of that nature. So I think it's a commendable recommendation, and I think it's a long time coming. So I'm glad to see the state is looking at that.
Okay. Okay, I'm over time now. So and I know that you had a hard stop at 5, and so we're a little bit past your hard stop, but is there anything else that anybody has on their mind that's burning in nature? Otherwise, I'm going to entertain a motion to adjourn. Yes.
I'm Ginger Van Wagenen. My question is simply this. You haven't set a next meeting, and I certainly understand why not. How does the public find out? Do I need to check the website every day to see if there's been a meeting set?
No, I can email you, or I can call you and let you know when the
Okay.
next meeting is.
That would be awesome.
I think I have
Thank
your
you.
email info.
Okay, yes, you do. Thank you, Mr.
You're
Chair.
welcome. Not a problem. Anything else for the good of the order from anybody? Okay. Hearing that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Probably moved and seconded. Any unreadiness on the motion? Any unreadiness on the motion? Any unreadiness on the motion? Hearing none, the motion carries. Okay, and we stand adjourned.